Hi, welcome back to That Doesn't Suck. I'm Dean, and I'm here. We're making, we had a previous episode where we made some bagels, so we're going to make more today. And like everything, once you've made it once, the next time you make it, you double it. So we're going to do a little bit different this time, though, because I'm planning on doing some of them a cinnamon raisin style, and I'm planning on doing the some coated in cheese, and then of course I'll do this everything bagel seasoning, and I'll do the sesame seeds because I love sesame seeds. My wife loves the everything, and the others ought to be good too. So anyway, we're going to start. We're going to mix everything up. So once again, the normal recipe is 500 grams of flour. So I've used hard white flour that I've already milled, and I have 1,000 grams of it here, and it's 150 grams of the yeast starter. So I have 300 grams here, 80 grams of the granulated honey, and now you could use sugar if you wanted for this same amount, so 1-to-1 exchange, and then 22 grams of salt. So it normally would be 40 and 11. So now we're going to go ahead and mix it up. We're going to put first, and also we have 650 grams of water, because we did 325 before. So we're going to take our yeast starter and get it in the bowl. And our water. And we're going to stir this up and break down the yeast mixture and try to get this like a consistent milkiness so we can get it evenly incorporated into the flour. Yeah, make that a good slurry. Okay, then we're going to add our flour, the honey granules, and the salt. We're just going to get it all in there and get this all mixed up. Going to get it out of the whisk, and this is where I like to switch over to the spatula. You just turn the bowl, and it's almost like you're folding it. It's always a bit more work when you double the recipe because everything just takes a little bit more effort. However, you get twice as much, and you don't have to go through the whole process again in a couple of days because you ate them all because they were stinking good. All right. So we're going to get this all to come together. Want to make sure we're hydrated. And it feels pretty good. I'm throwing stuff all over the place here. I just want to make sure there's nothing dry left in the bowl. Yeah, at this point it's just easier with the hand. The last one, when it was a smaller bowl, it was easier to do with the spatula, and you know, the spatula being silicone, things don't stick to it very well, so it works really well in bread applications. All right, that feels pretty good. So we're going to cover this and let it sit for a half an hour, and then we're going to go ahead and knead it. And when I knead it, I'm going to split some of it off and add some cinnamon sugar and some raisins. Now we're we're going to get back to our bagels. Get the dough out of the bowl. And I'm going to cut this roughly about a quarter. So we're going to set that quarter aside. I'm going to spend a few minutes kneading. So we're just basically rolling over, turn it a quarter, flatten it out. All right. That looks pretty good. That's brought it up quite a bit. So now we're going to set that aside. Leave it covered. And we'll come back to that in about 10 or 12 hours, 8 to 12 hours. So in the morning, now this little bit of dough. So what I did was, I'm just going to stretch this out. And I mixed up about 3 teaspoons of cinnamon and a little over half a teaspoon of nutmeg. I like mixing the nutmeg and the cinnamon. I think that's a great flavor combination for these. I think it adds just a little bit of something special. Anyway, so I'm probably not going to use all of this. So I just want to, it's like a cinnamon roll. We're spreading it out. No, we're going to go ahead and use it all. And then I'm going to put probably, I don't know, somewhere between a quarter and a third a cup of raisins. And that should be enough. I'm going to roll that up. And we're just going to go through the same process. Roll it over. And we're going to knead this. Get all that mixed in. Now you're going to have some funky times here because this is all going to want to come apart. But we're trying to get this mixed in to the dough. I'm going to go ahead, put a little water on my hands, because with the cinnamon in here, I think we're drying it out a little bit. Now I didn't add any sugar into this because I want to add a flavoring. I don't want to add more sweetness to the dough. So we're going to knead this and hopefully work all these raisins back in. But if some don't get worked in, we'll set them aside and use them for something else. Because I don't want them exposed when we bake them. I want them as much incorporated as possible. So I figure if they don't stay in, I've probably added too much to begin with. It's like a cinnamon raisin explosion in here. And this kneading process is going to get all that cinnamon mixed in. So that the flavor runs throughout, so it's not like a swirled in cinnamon roll. And tell you the truth, when this rolls out tomorrow, when we shape the bagels, if there's any raisins that stick out, I will probably pluck them off. Because I don't want them sticking out when they bake. Because like I said, they will puff up and get all blackened and just be kind of crazy looking. All right. I think we've got this well kneaded now, because we don't need to do this for a ton. And we'll let this rise overnight. And then in the morning we'll get these out and start shaping them into bagels and boil them. And then we'll bake them. It's not too hard a process. It does take a lot of time, but the time is in the proofing and the boiling. But it's really, if you take your time and you study the process, it doesn't take too long, and you can have some fresh bagels, and believe me, they're good. They're a lot better than store-bought. So, all right, I'm gonna get a fresh bowl, and we're gonna cover that, put this in it. We'll put it in, then cover it. See you in the morning. All right, good morning. So we've got our dough all set. It's been proofing overnight. It looks pretty good. Actually, at this point, our dough for the plain bagels looks pretty good, but the cinnamon raisin, I think, needs to spend a little more time proofing. Still feels pretty firm. So I'm going to leave that for a bit, and then we'll come back to it. But we're going to go ahead and shape. All right, so we're just gonna do these into equal pieces. And so I halved it, so we should have, I cut a fourth of it out already. So usually the last batch ended up with 8 bagels. This one should end up with, of course, 16, but we're gonna get 12 out of this portion of the dough. And like I mentioned before, if you really wanted to at this point, you could weigh these out and get them very even. So I need 3 more, so I'm gonna cut a little off. It's always hard to get the proportions just right. That's why the weighing actually might be the right thing to do. I know I've done this with rolls where I'll measure them out to be 90 grams or 80 grams or sometimes 120 grams. All right. Everything looks pretty even. All right, so we're just gonna roll them out. Try to make a nice smooth ball. Then gonna make our hole. I want to start with a pretty good size stretch on it because they're gonna relax and come back together.
like I said, the other method. And I think this might actually give you, I can see why some people like it, because doing those, they look a little rough this morning. Making the center hole. Stretch that out. And since I'm done cutting, I'm going to set that aside. Then you just splice them together, overlapping. And this dough is sticky enough yet where it comes together pretty well. So, because I don't know, I don't like the seam. But that actually looks better. I guess it depends. If your dough is a little drier and doesn't want to come back together, it might be a good idea just to do the ball and the hole method. But that's why sometimes you've just got to adjust fire and do things differently. So I like that much better. At least I like how it's looking. All right, that gives you a good idea. See how we're overlapping? Stretching it out a little bit. Try to make that thinner, give it a, you don't want to just butt it together. You want it to overlap a little bit because it'll come together better. And then you can hold it and give it a little roll. All right, I'll finish these and we'll be back when the cinnamon raisin ones are ready. Finally ready to shape the cinnamon raisin bagels. So I'm just gonna quarter the dough. And you can see everything. They look pretty good. The cinnamon is all thrown throughout. Feel kind of weird because they're creating a lot of voids with the with the raisins in there. I'm gonna remove some of them that are exposed, so they're gonna get weird and look and bake and fall off anyway. I'm just going to roll these, and I'm going to do the whole method because I think these are staying smoother. It's like I said, you just kind of have to go with it and figure out which method works best, because sometimes in certain situations one method works better than the other. These are definitely a different shaping experience. That cinnamon raisin mixed in, it just feels like a whole different texture. All right, these are going to sit for a little bit. It took a little longer for these. I let them sit and rise longer. So I'm going to let these set up, and then we'll boil them in a little bit. But right now I'm just about ready to boil the other ones and get them ready for the oven. Yeah, the ball and poke a hole method works better for this particular one, the way they're set up. Yeah, I probably could have cut back on the amount of raisins I put in the recipe, but sometimes it's better too many than too few. All right, so we've got those all set up. And we're just I'm gonna put those on the pan and cover them with a dish towel in a minute, and we'll let them rise. The cinnamon is all thrown throughout. Feel kind of weird because they're creating a lot of voids with the So we're going to put our bagels in the boiling water. We've got our honey in there, and these are, I've noticed, I did this with my last batch, they like to sink to the bottom, so you know it says 30 seconds to let them boil. So I'm just doing it because they say 30 seconds per side, so you would have to roll them over. Well, I'm doing it until they float. Because they started floating. Just making sure they're not stuck to the bottom. There we are. And this just gelatinizes. It does create that coating. All right, that shows the oven's up to temperature now. Yeah, they have a tendency to want to stick to the bottom once they hit. So, all right, once they start floating, don't like to have any more than 3 in at a time because of the size of the pan. Now, if you wanted a darker bagel, apparently you can also use, there are a few different things you can use to boil it in. You can also use molasses. And I think the other one they said was maple syrup instead of honey in the water. Just creates a little bit of a different, I don't know how much that would actually contribute to the flavor. Yeah, the float test seems to be a pretty good way to figure out if they're done. You can see the water getting a little cloudy as the starch is in there. All right, so I'm going to shut this off, and I'm just going to cover this and leave it as soon as this one is done. There we go. I'm going to cover this and leave it for the cinnamon raisin bagels, which I'll do in about an hour. I have my toppings. I have a mixture of Parmesan cheese and triple cheddar from Aldi that we're going to use for 4 of the bagels. This isn't, maybe those are a little dry yet. The cheese thing, I was playing with it, it's kind of a bust because the cheese doesn't stick like they thought it would. So, or like, I was led to believe it would. So I'm just putting a little on top. And I think a little underneath, because I tried re-wetting the bagels, but it just doesn't want to stick as well. And this stuff is kind of a coarse chop, so maybe a finer shredded cheese would work better. This looks like a mess, but it'll probably work fine. Okay. I have my dogs down here circling me because every time I pull out a bag of cheese, it's time to pay the cheese tax. And I just gave them some, but yet I reopened the bag. Therefore, I must pay again. All right, I'm going to spread those out a little bit, and then I have this one set up. Okay, let's take this off. Remove that. Okay, and the last time it took 23 minutes for these to be done. They say 25. I had misquoted myself, said 20 to 25, but they say 25 to 30, so. Now it's time for the cinnamon raisin bagels to get boiled up. just trying to agitate it a little bit to keep them off the bottom. These aren't wanting to float so much, so I'm just keeping them out. It's the difference because the raisins are weighing them down, so they're not as buoyant. Got a few bits floating around in here because I tried re-wetting those other bagels in the water to get the cheese to stick. So I ended up with a little cheese in the water, but it'll be fine. All right. Let those drip off. Put them back on the pan. Okay, back in the oven.
Hello, I'm recording this from my office because I made a mistake in the finishing of this video, and the scene I had made where I sliced the bagel open and took a look at it, I meant to show you, but it didn't record because for some reason I hit record at the end. I hit record and it didn't start. I didn't notice. And then I hit record at the end, and which actually started it recording. And I got a whole bunch of nonsense of my wife and I talking, which didn't make any sense at all. So I'm just going to tell you now, there's pictures of the bagels there. They turned out and they look good. They tasted good. Although I think I didn't let them rise enough. They were a little more chewy than the previous batch I did, but they're still awesome. So that's the way I would have them. So anyway, give it a shot. Try the bagels and try baking some yourself. Remember, that doesn't suck, so enjoy it. Thanks. Watch again.